Why is it that some people remain completely mysterious no matter how long you've actually known them? You know exactly who I'm talking about, right? It could be a coworker you sit next to every single day, a friend you've had for literally years, or even someone in your own family. You spend all this time with them, but you still feel like you haven't quite figured them out. Well, today, we're going to break down the psychology behind exactly that. We're going to look at 6 very specific traits that make someone incredibly hard to read. But first, we really have to clear up a massive misconception. When we can't read someone, our immediate instinct is usually to think, oh, they're being fake, or they're hiding something, or maybe they're even trying to manipulate us. But psychology shows us a completely different reality. These folks aren't playing games, they just possess certain traits that naturally make them harder to decode emotionally. And honestly, here is the really fascinating part. People who are hard to read often make these incredibly strong impressions on us without even trying. So why does that happen? Well, it's because when our brains cannot easily predict someone's emotional patterns, we are literally wired to keep paying attention to them. It's an automatic response. We are just totally captivated by the unpredictable.
Okay, let's start with layer 1, the surface. We're talking actions over explanations.
What's super interesting here is the stark contrast between typical behavior and our very first hard-to-read trait. These individuals just do not feel the need to explain themselves all the time. Think about most people in your everyday life. We live in an era of constant emotional updates, don't we? If most people are upset, they want to clarify exactly how they're feeling. If they make a decision, they explain the entire why behind it, just to make sure everyone's on the exact same page. They really crave that external validation. But reserved, hard-to-read people? They are remarkably comfortable just being misunderstood. Like, if they're in a meeting and disagree with the consensus, they might state their position simply, but they're not going to sit there and argue for 2 hours just to win you over. If they need space, there's no dramatic announcement, they literally just get up and take a quiet walk. Because they aren't relying on that external validation, they really don't feel the need to put on an emotional performance for the rest of us.
And that brilliantly illustrates our second trait. Their mood doesn't control their behavior. Think about the contrast here. Most of us become incredibly readable during highly emotional moments. If a typical person gets some harsh feedback at work, you're going to see that irritation, that insecurity, or that hurt written all over their face, right? You'll hear it in their tone. But emotionally disciplined people operate on a totally different level. Picture a really stressful everyday situation, maybe a chaotic travel delay or a super tense family dinner. A hard-to-read person can completely separate what they are feeling from how they are acting. Even if they're incredibly stressed out, they're still going to speak calmly to you. Even if they are deeply upset, they will absolutely still act respectfully. They're making an active choice to process their emotional pain privately. And that emotional discipline is exactly why you often can't even tell if they're having the worst day of their life or the absolute best one.
Moving right along to layer 2, social dynamics. These are the quiet observers.
This brings us to the third trait. And wow, this quote really hits the nail on the head. Hard-to-read people ask way more questions than they answer. And there's a fascinating bit of psychology at play here, which is that humans naturally trust people who listen well. So picture this. You're at a networking event or maybe just catching up over coffee. The hard-to-read person naturally slips right into the role of the observer instead of trying to be the center of attention. They let you talk, they listen with this intense focus, noticing all the tiny details of your story. And then, an hour goes by, you walk away, and it suddenly hits you. You just spilled your entire life story, essentially got a free therapy session, and you learned absolutely nothing new about them. By controlling that flow of information, they naturally create this sense of mystery. And the less information your brain gets about them, the more it frantically tries to analyze them long after the conversation is over.
Which perfectly sets up our fourth trait. They just don't react strongly to attention. For a lot of people, the second public attention enters the mix, boom, they become an open book. Compliments make them visibly glow, while rejection causes this instant, super noticeable mood crash. But hard-to-read people, they possess a really profound emotional balance. If you praise them for a killer presentation, they'll appreciate it, sure, but they aren't addicted to it. If someone is subtly disrespectful to them in a group setting, they definitely notice it, but they're not going to explode. Psychology links this directly to their internal emotional stability. Because their core identity isn't wildly riding the roller coaster of outside opinions, they completely avoid those dramatic public reactions. And that makes their emotional patterns incredibly difficult for the rest of us to predict.
All right, let's dig into layer 3, the trust framework. Let's look at how access is actually earned.
The absolutely crucial point here is the fifth trait. They think deeply before trusting people. In our culture today, some folks emotionally open up at basically lightning speed. They'll drop their deepest childhood trauma on you after a second cup of coffee. And because they trust so easily, they are incredibly easy to read. But hard-to-read individuals view trust in a totally different way.
For them, trust is an earned level of access. They keep parts of their lives completely private, and it's not because they want to be intentionally mysterious or difficult. It's because life experience has taught them a very real, very hard lesson. Access to their inner world has to be safe, and it absolutely must be earned. It is not just handed out as a free pass to strangers.
Now, if you have someone who's hard to read in your life, you'll really want to pay close attention to this next part, because these specific factors are exactly what they are quietly observing about you right now. They are studying you before they decide to open up. If you want to build healthy trust with these folks, you absolutely cannot rush it. First, you've got to demonstrate consistency over time. They need to see that you are exactly who you claim to be, day in and day out. They are looking for good character and positive intentions. Like, do you gossip about other people? Because if you do, they're instantly going to assume you'll gossip about them too. And finally, they are closely watching how you handle difficult situations. If you can maintain stable behavior when things go off the rails, they will slowly begin to feel safe enough to unlock the gate and actually let you in.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. Layer 4. Beneath the surface. Their inner life.
That calm, cool exterior you see every single day, it's kind of an illusion. It is actually hiding a highly active, incredibly rich inner life. While they might literally just be sitting quietly in a room, internally they are reflecting so deeply on everything happening around them. They are constantly mentally processing the world. They overthink quietly. They analyze situations from literally every possible angle, but they do it all privately. So while most people are out there just talking through their feelings in real time, the hard-to-read person is having this massive, complex, emotional conversation entirely inside their own head. By the time they actually speak a thought out loud to you, you better believe they have already debated it, analyzed it, and processed the emotions attached to it 100 times over.
So, what's the big takeaway from this explainer? Well, it's this. When you encounter someone who is hard to read, please do not mistake their quietness for emptiness. They are absolutely not devoid of emotion. In fact, it is usually the exact opposite. The people who reveal the least about themselves on the surface are very often the ones who are feeling and thinking the absolute most internally. The depth is absolutely there. It just exists entirely beneath the surface, waiting for the right person to actually earn the right to see it.
Which leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question to think about. Who is the hardest person to read in your life? Take a second today to really look at them through this new lens. Consider the emotional discipline, the quiet observation, and that deep inner life they are so carefully protecting. You might just find that the most mysterious people in your life are actually the most fascinating ones to truly understand. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to keep exploring the depths beneath the surface.